Good afternoon, and welcome to our session on growing government revenues and the power of pricing. My name is James Brown. I'm the managing partner of Simon Kucher & Partners in the UK, and I'm joined by my colleague Rod Hunter this afternoon. And we're here to talk to you about pricing and growing government revenues. And the reason that we're here, our expertise on this area, we come from the world's #1 pricing consultancy. We operate across all sectors, so everything from automotive to bank accounts, from industrial manufacturing through to supermarkets, software and media to pharmaceuticals, and of course, public and third sector. We price and help advise how organizations should price their products and services. And we're global, so we bring examples from not just all industries, but from all sectors of the world as well, all areas. And we've done around 1,500 projects in the space of sales, marketing, and pricing this year and the last 2 or 3 years running as well. So we bring lots of these examples in, and we like to preach the power of pricing, and we feel it has a role to play in growing government revenues here in the UK. We want to take 15 minutes talking to you about that, about why we should be using pricing to drive government revenues. So first of all, we'll start with the fundamentals, why it's the most effective profit lever. We'll then go on to consider a little bit about why it's overlooked before exploring 3 aspects of pricing: the importance of getting the strategy right in the first place and agreeing on it, the role of the price model in the decision-making process, and also, last but not least, actually setting prices and price points themselves. So if we start off with that then, the fundamentals of pricing. Of course, there's a lot of people here this afternoon from the local government sector where we often differentiate between trading and the trading that's been allowed by the Localism Act 2011, setting up local authority trading companies where they have a specific role and are deliberately trying to make a profit or surplus, and charging, where we're talking about recovery of discretionary service costs. In reality, you can use price for both, of course, because and price to improve the performance of both. We use the same mechanism to ensure that we make a zero profit as we do to ensure that we boost our profitability. So let's think about that for a moment. What is profit? Profit, very simply, can be defined by a formula of price minus variable costs times volume minus fixed costs. And if we break those down, pricing is by far the most interesting for looking at for optimization at the moment. A lot of people have been doing cost management this year. A lot of efforts have been made to reduce costs, especially given the volatility in the economy. And improvements have been made. Cost-cutting initiatives have gone on for decades, and there's been a real boost, of course, over the last 10 or so years in the UK. Improvements have been made in fixed costs. Variable costs, you can only go so far before you start damaging quality of service or product. And volume, well, limited possibility to move volume without using price is one of the levers, or significant investment in marketing and sales. Price, though, price has not been professionally optimized. If we look beyond the public sector, if we look out into different areas of the economy, we know that pricing is probably at its most advanced in the world of leisure and travel. They've been optimizing price dynamically, using it to steer volumes for decades now. Next, in terms of sophistication or complexity, possibly comes retail. Huge volumes of transactions and a deep understanding of shoppers and consumers. And then possibly pharmaceutical, where you're really having to in-depth understand the value of very complicated products which are offered into the market. But everywhere has been professionalizing in price. All sectors have been getting better and better at the way they do pricing. And over the last 10 years, we've seen a real development of the role of the professional in pricing. More and more people with pricing in their job title, more functions and departments or teams being set up within organizations to look at how to manage and control price. So that's why it's interesting, but what about some numbers behind that? The most effective profit lever, we said. If we take a very simple example, imagine we're selling widgets. Every widget costs has a price of £100. and a variable cost for each widget we make of £60. Sales volume 1 million, fixed costs of 30 million. If we turn that into a simplified P&L, what we find there is that with those numbers, we're making 10 million in profit. Now, take through a simple example. If I improve my fixed costs by 5%, I boost my profitability by 15%. If I improve my sales volume by 5%, I boost my profitability by 20%. If I reduce my variable unit costs by 5%, it starts to get even more interesting because I make 30% more profit. But actually, if I increase my price by 5% and manage to get the same volumes, then I can increase my profitability by 50%. And that's because all of that increase, that £5 increase, that's all I've done, moved from 100 to 105, turns my 10 million profit into a 15 million profit. So price is the profit driver. So why in that case do we overlook price? We ask people this question a lot. Why aren't you focusing on price more? And we get different answers back. We cut costs because we know what to do. We know what happens if we cut our costs. Price is determined by the market. It's outside our control. And interestingly, of course, some government bodies go into a market, local authority trading companies even go into a market to start regulating price to make sure there is a lower cost alternative for their citizens. So we know that we can actually, price isn't just determined by a market. Companies have a role in determining price, but we often feed that to outside forces. No one owns pricing. People tend to think that there's no one in their organization with single responsibility for it. Also, people often don't have the capability in their organization to manage and deal with price professionally. So we tend to put it in that it's too difficult bucket. And also, particularly in the public sector, pricing is seen as something that profit optimizing organizations focus on, rather than organizations looking to serve citizens. But actually, we can use price to improve our price perceptions, to create products and offerings that improve our access as well. So price has a role to play no matter what our objectives are. So I'm going to hand over to Ros now, who's going to talk to you about the different aspects of pricing.
Super, thanks, James. So when we think about price, we do think about it in three aspects when we're talking to our clients. And quite often people jump to point 3 and the level when they're looking at it, but also really think about the strategy. What are we trying to achieve? As James just said, often people put pricing and profit together and they don't think of the wider benefit and that can have for citizens and populations. And the key thing here is to say, actually, if we can make more profit in some areas, actually, can we use that to invest in others? And what is our strategy and our aim there? Secondly, the model, how you charge for things is as important as what you charge. And I'll take you through some examples shortly on different ways you can charge and different metrics. And then finally, the level, still very important, and particularly when you look at different parts of a population, what people are willing and able to pay for different products and services vary, and you obviously do need to reflect that as well. Jumping into our first slide quickly to cover strategy, you can't optimize anything if you don't know what you're optimizing for. We've got one example here. We're looking at a university and the price they were charging for different groups of students, and asked the key stakeholders at the beginning of the project, if the overall number of students was lower than today, but overall fee income was the same, would this be seen as a success or unsuccessful? And what we found from the results were that just over half felt that was successful, that actually it was the fee income rather than the volume of students that mattered more. 45% argued the exact opposite. So obviously it's very hard to set a pricing strategy and an aim when your key stakeholders are looking for different objectives. So really at the core, I really urge you all to go back and say, okay, right, if we're setting prices for different products and services, what is the aim of this and are we achieving it? Another way of looking at this is to look at the type of prices that are charged for different products and services. On the left is a classic example of one size fits all. We're looking at what the prices that we can charge are and the volume that we can get. And obviously, if you charge one price, there'll be one set of volume in terms of end users who are willing to purchase a product. Now, this loses a couple of people. So at the top, you've got these customers who did want to purchase the product or the service, but they couldn't afford to. At the bottom end, you also have a group of people that would have paid a lot more, which is obviously profit that could be used to be invested elsewhere. Now, what we look for in products often, moving on to our next chart, is to say, actually, can we look at different ways of differentiating this, which then help us both target those with lower willingness to pay, maybe those with lower incomes, potentially with a product or service at certain times or with different quality levels, or can we also look at ways of charging those with high willingness to pay, maybe for a higher quality product or for products at certain times of day. By allowing that differentiation, you can achieve more people consuming products and services, which obviously from an accessibility question across citizens and population is really valuable. Moving on to our next topic of models. So this is also really interesting to think of, and particularly with the world of subscriptions growing, there's a whole different way that people are looking at how products and services can be charged for. I'm going to take you the classic example of public transport and bus travel. So the classic way of pricing for this, which could be deemed as the fairest, is to be charging for a route-to-route offer. And that is a classic bus fare that we all think of in most parts of the world. You go from point A to point B, and that's this price. So there's a lot of different prices, very complex. A second way of looking at this is by time. So that's to say, maybe you buy a ticket for a day, a week, a month, and alongside that, then there's more certainty. It may also encourage people to consume more because they're not actually parting with additional money each time they consume the product. So from looking at the impact on a population, that could actually really increase transportation than a point-to-point. And finally, volume. Now here it may be saying actually if people purchase multiple tickets at a point in time, or if they travel so much within a certain time, we cap maybe the fare that they charge, or they get a discount on their products. So also adding an extra element of fairness into that by saying actually those who consume the most get the best price. So different ways of thinking about that. And I really urge you to go through different products and services you charge for and start to think if you can really adapt the metric that you're charging for. And then moving on to the price level, which is also key. We can't ignore it. On the left, we have one example of a price list. And there's a lot of different prices here. And as a pricing professional, I'm going to say some are definitely better than others, not just by the level, but particularly to the price thresholds they come to. Some key offenders circled there on the left, just to give you the idea of here. So, prices like this, like 107, it's gone over the £1 price threshold, but the reality is a 107 versus a 99 is a very different price point. Consumers will view it as much more expensive than the 99, even though it's a relatively small increase in terms of actual pence. And then we see the 847 again. No consumer sees a difference between an 847 and an 849, and you may actually be able to use some of the pennies charged there to subsidize other areas and maybe not push some of the lower price points. Simple rounding on the right is what we view as better price points. So you see those 99s, 49s, and you see that in a lot of commerce in both the public and private sector. Allowing that means both improved price fairness and perception, but also allowing you to get the best volumes out of the prices charged. So moving on, we've been through a bit of a whirlwind tour there of strategy models and levels, and really do think through these different aspects. I'm happy to answer any questions in the panel afterwards. On top of these, there's a lot more issues that pricing professionals have really had to deal with in the last months. I don't want to bring up the world COVID-19 too much, but we see a lot of elements in terms of shifting demand and channel patterns, new barriers to purchase, changes in willingness to pay from incomes, and constant uncertainty means that optimizing prices has become an even more complex task. And realistically, with Brexit providing further shifts in demand and supply, and also potentially increased costs, there's further work to do next year as well. So key takeaways, I really do urge you to go back to your organizations and look where and how prices are being set. Look where cost is really driving price, and are there opportunities to differentiate that price or change the model. There may also be some quick wins. We talked about that price rounding and price thresholds. So take a look over the prices being charged for different products and services and see if there's an opportunity to make some initial changes today or tomorrow. So thank you very much for listening. I'm super excited to talk and answer any of your questions on the panel shortly. Thank you for listening.